My name is Maya. I'm 27 years old, and for the last 3 years, my family has referred to me as the cautionary tale of the household. They told everyone I was a broke artist, a dreamer who had lost touch with reality, and someone who would eventually come crawling back to beg for a desk job at my father's logistics firm. When the eviction notice was taped to my studio door 6 months ago, I reached out to them last time. I didn't want money. I just wanted a place to store my canvases for 2 weeks. My mother laughed over the phone and told me that maybe if I sold my coloring books, I could afford a storage unit. Net my brother texted me a link to a job opening for a delivery driver. They didn't know that the canvases they called coloring books were part of the Silent City collection. They didn't know that while I was sleeping on a friend's couch and eating instant noodles, the prestigious Sterling Gallery in London was finalizing a deal to acquire my entire portfolio. Last week, that deal closed for $5 million. And tonight is the first time I'm seeing them since they watched me pack my life into a rusted sedan while they stood on the porch and sipped wine. Before we get into how I handled that dinner, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Growing up in the Miller house in suburban Illinois, success had a very specific look. It looked like my brother, Marcus, who wore ironed shirts and talked about scaling operations. It looked like my father, Robert, who measured a person's worth by the year and make of their car. I was always the outlier. I spent my time in the garage, covered in charcoal and oil paint, trying to capture the way light hits a window during a thunderstorm. Maya, it's a hobby, my father would say, leaning against the door frame of the garage. Hobbies are for the weekends. Life is for the bills. When are you going to sign up for those business classes at the community college? I tried. I really did. I spent 2 years in an office cubicle after graduation, feeling my soul slowly turn to gray. I was miserable. So, I quit. I took my savings, moved into a drafty loft in the city, and decided to give myself 2 years to make artwork. My parents reacted as if I had joined a cult. They didn't offer support. They offered tough love. In their minds, if they made my life difficult enough, I would snap out of it and return to the path they had paved for me. The first year was hard, but the second year was a nightmare. The art market was slow, and my landlord was a man who didn't care about creative cycles. He cared about the first of the month. By the time winter hit, I was behind on rent. I was skipping meals to buy tubes of ultramarine blue and titanium white. One Tuesday evening in November, I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at a final eviction notice. The heating had been turned off 2 days prior. I could see my breath in the air. I swallowed my pride and called home. My mother, Elena, answered. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. They were having dinner. Probably the roast chicken she made every Tuesday. Mom, I started, my voice trembling. I'm in a bit of a spot. I have to move out of the loft by Friday. I don't need money, I swear. But can I bring my paintings to the house? Just for a couple of weeks while I find a new place? If the landlord seizes the unit, he'll throw them in the trash. 3 years of work, Mom, please. There was a long silence. Then, I heard her sigh. It was that heavy, disappointed sigh she had perfected since I was 10. Maya, we talked about this, she said, her voice cold. Your father and I decided that if we keep helping you, we're just enabling this delusion. If you have nowhere to go, it's because you chose a path that leads nowhere. If you want to come home, you can. We'll clear out the guest room. But the paintings stay in the city. We aren't turning our basement into a graveyard for failed dreams. Mom, they aren't failed dreams. I have a showing next month at a coffee shop? She interrupted. Maya, stop. Marcus is here. He says if you're really that desperate, he can get you a shift at the warehouse. It's honest work. It pays $12 an hour. Think about it. We have to go, the food is getting cold. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for 3 hours. I didn't cry. Something inside me just clicked shut. I realized then that my family didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to be wrong. They wanted the satisfaction of saying, "I told you so," more than they wanted their daughter to be happy. Zoo, the next morning, I did something I should have done months ago. I called Julian Sterling. He was a gallery owner I had met briefly at a student showcase years ago. He had given me his card and told me to call him when I was ready to be famous. I thought he was just being polite. "Julian," I said when he picked up. "This is Maya Miller. You told me to call when I was ready, Maya." He breathed, his British accent sharp and energized. "I've been watching your Instagram. Those new pieces. The Silent City series. They haunting. They're visceral. I was going to email you this morning. I have a collector in Dubai and another in London who are fighting over the digital previews I showed them. How soon can you get the physical canvases to my New York office?" "I'm being evicted on Friday," I said bluntly. "Perfect," Julian replied. "A starving artist narrative. The press will eat it up. Don't worry about the loft. I'm sending a professional art transport team to your address in 4 hours. They'll pack everything. And Maya, I'm sending a car for you too. You're staying at the pier. My treat. We have a lot of paperwork to sign." I hung up, looking at the eviction notices. For the first time in months, I felt warm. The transport team arrived in a climate-controlled truck. They handled my canvases like they were made of thin glass. As they were loading the last of the crates, my father's black SUV pulled up to the curb. He rolled down the window, looking at the men in uniforms and the heavy-duty crates. "What's this?" he shouted over the noise of the city. "The city finally clearing out the trash for you?" I stood there, wearing a coat with a hole in the pocket, and just smiled. "Something like that, Dad." "Well, don't expect us to pay the disposal fee," he grunted, then sped off. He thought he was watching the end of my career. He had no idea he was watching the birth of a multi-million-dollar acquisition. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence from them, and 6 months of the most intense, whirlwind success I could have ever imagined. The Silent City collection didn't just sell, it became a cultural moment. I went from having $42 in my bank account to having $5 million. But I didn't tell them. I didn't change my social media. I didn't post pictures of my new penthouse or the clothes I was now wearing. I wanted to see how long they would let me starve. Then, yesterday, I got a group text. "Marcus. Hey sis, heard from a friend you're still floating around the city. Look, Mom and Dad's 30th anniversary is tomorrow. We're doing dinner at Le Valorie. It's expensive, so Dad said he'll cover your plate just this once. Try to dress nice, okay? No paint stains." I stared at the screen. Le Valorie. A place where a salad costs more than my old weekly grocery budget. They wanted to show off their success to me, to make me feel small and more time in honor of their anniversary. I replied with 2 words. "I'll be there." I spent the afternoon with a personal shopper. I chose a dress that cost more than Marcus's car. A deep, midnight blue silk that looked like the sky in my paintings. As I pulled up to the restaurant in a black car that I didn't have to pay for, I saw them through the window. My father was holding court, laughing with Marcus, while my mother adjusted her pearls. They looked comfortable. They looked ready to pity me. I stepped out of the car, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the entrance. I could feel the weight of the checkbook in my clutch, the one that was about to change the power dynamic of this family forever. I walked into the dining room, and the hostess led me toward their table. Not my father saw me first. He started to look away, then did a double take. His jaw actually dropped. My mother turned, her pity smile frozen on her face. "Maya?" she whispered. Is that real silk?" I pulled out a chair and sat down, looking them each in the eye. "Happy anniversary, Mom, Dad. I hope you're hungry. Because tonight, the broke artist is buying." The silence at the table was louder than the entire restaurant, but this was just the setup. They still didn't know the real reason I was there. They didn't know that the company my father had been bragging about, one he wanted to expand, was currently in negotiations with a private equity firm, a firm that I had just become a silent partner in. The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting is designed to make everyone look successful, but under the warm glow of the chandeliers, my family looked like they had seen a ghost. My father's hand stayed frozen on his wineglass. My mother's eyes darted from my face to the diamond-dusted watch on my wrist, then back to my face. Marcus was the first to find his voice, though it sounded thin and strained. Maya? What is this? Who did you borrow that dress from? He tried to chuckle, looking at my father for backup. Dad, looks like she found a costume shop. I told you she was getting dramatic. I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I signaled the waiter, a tall man who moved with the grace of a shadow. We'll start with a bottle of the 2015 Krug, I said, my voice steady. And the caviar service. For 4. The waiter nodded and vanished. My father leaned forward, his face turning a familiar shade of mottled red. Maya, stop this nonsense. You can't afford a bottle of water in this place, let alone vintage champagne. Do you have any idea how much that costs? It's more than your rent used to be. I know exactly how much it costs, Dad, I replied, leaning back and crossing my legs. And since I no longer have a rent payment, I find I have quite a bit of extra cash. How has the logistics firm been? I heard through the grapevine that the scaling operations Marcus was so proud of hit a bit of a snag. The silence returned, but this time it was heavy with defensiveness. Marcus stiffened. The firm was my father's life's work, and Marcus had been the golden boy vice president for 5 years. But the industry had shifted. Automated logistics and AI-driven supply chain management were eating small firms like theirs alive. They were struggling, and I knew it because I had spent the last month reading their quarterly reports with my financial advisor. We're fine, Marcus snapped. We're actually in the middle of a major acquisition. A private equity group is looking at us. It's a multi-million-dollar exit for Dad. So, if you're here to gloat about some little art commission you got, you might want to save it. A major acquisition? I repeated, swirling the water in my glass. That sounds wonderful. I hope you did your due diligence on the buyer. Sometimes these firms like to gut the company and fire the family members first. My mother reached across the table, her hand touching mine. Her skin was cold. Maya, let's not talk about business. Not tonight. It's our anniversary. I'm surprised to see you looking so well. We were so worried when you stopped answering our texts. I pulled my hand back slowly. Worried? Mom, you told me my work belonged in a graveyard for failed dreams. You told me I was delusional. When I was being kicked out into the street, you told me the food was getting cold. You weren't worried. You were waiting for me to fail so you could feel right. The waiter arrived with the champagne. The ritual of the pour gave us a moment of forced quiet. I watched the bubbles rise, thinking about the nights I spent in that freezing loft, wrapped in a blanket, wondering if I really was crazy. I thought about the tough love they had served me for years. I didn't fail, I said, once the waiter was gone. I sold the Silent City collection, every piece. My father scoffed. To who? Some local library? A charity auction? Maya, I've seen your paintings. They're just lines and shadows, Dawn. Nobody pays real money for that. The Sterling Gallery in London bought the portfolio, Dad, for $5 million. After taxes and commissions, I walked away with enough to buy your logistics firm 3 times over. My father's glass hit the table with a sharp clack. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Marcus actually started to laugh. A high, nervous sound. 5 million? You? The girl who couldn't keep her electricity on? Marcus shook his head. Nice try, Maya. You always did have a vivid imagination. Is that why you're here? To play make-believe for an hour before you go back to your shelter? I'm staying at the Pierre, Marcus. In the presidential suite. You can call the front desk if you like. Ask for Maya Miller. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a printout of a news clipping from the Financial Times. I was a small blurb about a new venture capital firm, Blue Canvas Holdings, and their recent acquisition of 3 Midwest logistics companies. I slid it across the table to my father. Look at the bottom, Dad. Under the principal partners section. His eyes scanned the paper. I watched the color drain from his face. I watched his fingers tremble as he read the name. Maya Miller. Founding partner. What is this? He whispered. Blue Canvas? That's the firm that sent us the letter of intent yesterday. They're the ones offering to buy us out. I know, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I wrote the letter. The betrayal in the room was palpable. It wasn't a betrayal of trust, because there was none left. It was a betrayal of their entire reality. In their world, I was the bottom of the food chain. I was the servant, the failure, the one they could use to make themselves feel superior. And now, I held their entire future in my hands. "You're trying to take the company?" Marcus yelled, attracting glances from the other tables. "Dad, she's trying to steal your legacy. This is revenge. This is sick." "It's not stealing if I pay for it, Marcus," I said calmly. "And I'm offering market value. Though, I have to say, the audit we did was enlightening. The amount of company money you've spent on travel and entertainment over the last 2 years is almost impressive. If I were the owner, I'd probably refer that to the authorities." Marcus turned pale. He knew I'd found the paper trail. He'd been bleeding the company dry to maintain his lifestyle, thinking the sale would cover his tracks. My father looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not the fear of a parent for a child, but the fear of a man who realizes he has no power. "Maya, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I built that company from a single truck. You wouldn't ruin me." "Ruin you?" I tilted my head. "I'm trying to save you, Dad. The firm is failing. You're 6 months away from bankruptcy. I'm offering you a way out with your dignity and enough money to retire comfortably. But there's a condition." "Anything," my mother pleaded. "Maya, we're family. We can fix this." "The condition is simple," I said. "Marcus is out. He's fired effective immediately. He gets no payout, no severance, and he has to return the company car by tomorrow morning. And you and Ma? You're going to move to the Florida house full-time. You'll have your pension, but you'll have no say in the business, and you will never, ever mention my hobby again." "You can't do that!" Marcus screamed. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Mom, tell her! She can't do this to me!" But my mother didn't look at him. She was looking at the champagne in her glass. She was a bookkeeper. She knew the numbers. She knew I was the only lifeboat they had left. "Marcus, sit down," she whispered. "No, I'm not letting her win. She's a fluke, a lucky brat who painted some pictures." I stood up, smoothing my dress. I hadn't even touched the caviar. "The offer stands until 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you don't sign the letter of intent by then, Blue Canvas withdraws, and I'll personally make sure every creditor you have knows exactly how dire your situation is." I looked at my mother. "The meal is paid for. Enjoy your anniversary." As I walked out of the restaurant, I heard the first sob break from my mother's throat. I heard Marcus shouting my name, but I didn't turn around. I felt a strange sense of lightness. For years, I had carried the weight of their disappointment like a lead vest. Now, I was finally breathing. But the night wasn't over. As I waited for my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing to your family, Maya. And I know where the Silent City inspiration really came from. If you think 5 million is enough to keep me quiet, you're wrong." My heart skipped a beat. The Silent City series was based on a series of journals I'd found. Journals that didn't belong to me. Journals that held a secret darker than anything my father had ever done. I looked at the screen. The cold New York air biting at my skin. The cliffhanger I was standing on wasn't just about my family. It was about the very foundation of my success.
The vibration of the phone in my hand felt like an electric shock. I stood under the green awning of the restaurant, the city noise blurring into a dull huff. I read the message again. "I know where the Silent City inspiration really came from." My vision narrowed. The Silent City collection was the foundation of my $5 million life. It was a series of 12 massive canvases, abstract, haunting depictions of urban isolation. The critics called it a masterpiece of modern observation, but the truth was tucked away in a locked metal box beneath the floorboards of my new penthouse. 3 years ago, during my darkest month in that freezing loft, I had found a stack of leather-bound journals in the communal basement of my building. They were tucked behind a rusted water heater, covering decades of dust. Thought they belonged to a woman named Clara Vance, an artist who had lived in my exact unit in the 1970s before disappearing with a trace. Her journals weren't just diaries, they were filled with vivid, terrifyingly beautiful descriptions of the city, observations of light and shadow that I had never been able to articulate. I didn't steal her art, but I stole her eyes. I used her words to find my brushstrokes. I had translated her forgotten soul into my $1 million paintings. Before we go any further into the dark moment that followed that dinner, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt like a fraud, even when you were winning? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading every single but tonight, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We're only halfway through the truth.
I looked around the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who could have known? The building had dozens of tenants over the years. I stepped into the back of my car, my hands shaking so violently I had to tuck them under my thighs. The Pierre, I told the driver, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. As the car pulled away, I watched my family through the window. Marcus was pacing the sidewalk, his face contorted in a scream I couldn't hear. My father was sitting at the table, staring at the empty chair where his daughter, the failure, had just dismantled his life. I should have felt victorious. I should have been savoring the taste of their shock. Instead, I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. When I reached my suite, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city was a grid of light, beautiful and indifferent. I pulled the phone out again. "Who is this?" I messaged back. The reply was instant. "Check the vents in your old loft, Maya. You missed none of Clara's sketches. It's a study for grid, your most famous piece. It's identical. Even the perspective is hers. I have it. And I have the police report from 1979 regarding her disappearance. Would be a shame if the Sterling Gallery found out their star artist is a grave robber." My stomach turned. I hadn't just used her inspiration. I had unknowingly walked into a crime scene. I felt a cold sweat break across my neck. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But my mind kept drifting back to my family, thought they were the reason I was in this mess. If they had helped me, if they had given me a place to store my things, I never would have gone into that basement. I never would have found those journals. I would still be a broke artist with a clean conscience. The next morning, the deadline for my father's company arrived. 9 a.m. I sat in the hotel's breakfast nooft, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of me. At 9:02 a.m., my lawyer called. "Maya, the letter of intent has been signed and returned," he said. "Your father and Marcus are officially out. The transition begins on Monday." "And Marcus?" I asked. "He tried to refuse the car return. We had to send a repo team to his apartment. He's not taking it well, Maya. He's been calling the office every 10 minutes, demanding to speak to the real owners. He still doesn't believe it's you." "Let him call," I said, though there was no joy in it now. "Just handle the paperwork." I hung up and checked my private messages. Nothing from the stranger. The silence was worse than the threats. I felt like I was being hunted. I decided to do something reckless. I put on a hoodie and sunglasses, took a taxi back to my old neighborhood, and walked into the lobby of my old building top. The air smelled of damp concrete and old mail. I avoided the elevator and took the stairs to the basement. I needed to see if there was anything else hidden behind that water heater. I needed to know if I had left a trail. The basement was dimly lit. I pushed past the piles of discarded furniture and broken bikes. I reached the corner where the water heater stood. It was gone. In its place was a brand new, shiny boiler. The area had been cleaned, sanitized. "Looking for something, Maya?" I whirled around. Standing in the shadows was a woman I didn't recognize. She looked to be in her late 60s, with sharp, bird-like features and silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She was wearing an expensive trench coat that looked out of place in the grimy basement. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm the one who lived in 4B before you," she said, stepping into the light. "The one who watched you carry those leather journals out of here 3 years ago." I thought you were just a curious girl. I didn't think you'd turn Clara's pain into a $5 million paycheck. Are you the one who messaged me? No, she said, her eyes narrowing. But I know who did. It was Marcus. I felt the air leave my lungs. Marcus? My brother doesn't know anything about art. He doesn't know about this building. He does now, she said. He came here 3 days ago. He was looking for dirt on you. He paid the super $500 to let him into your old unit. He found a sketchbook you'd wedged into the back of a kitchen drawer. He's been here every day since, digging through the trash, talking to the old-timers. He's desperate, Maya. And a desperate man is a dangerous thing. The betrayal hit me harder than the eviction ever had. My own brother hadn't just abandoned me. He was actively trying to destroy the only thing I had built. He was willing to ruin my career, my reputation, and my life just to get back the company he'd been stealing from. Why are you telling me this? I asked the woman. She looked at the spot where the old water heater had been. Because Clara was my friend. And she would have hated what you did with her journals, but she would have hated your brother more. He's a small man. Clara was a giant. If you're going to be a thief, Maya, at least be a smart one. Don't let a parasite like him take the credit. I left the basement in a daze. My brother was the blackmailer. The person who shared my blood was the one hold the knife to my throat. I walked through the city for hours. The silent city mocking me from every gallery window I passed. I was a millionaire with no home, a CEO with no family, and an artist with no soul. I reached the pier at the edge of the Hudson River. The water was dark and churning. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. I know it's you, I said when he picked up. Yehady. Fly me. He spat. I could hear the sound of a TV in the background. Was probably in some cheap motel, hiding from the repo men. You think you're so smart, Maya. You think you can just fire me and move mom and dad like chess pieces? I have the sketchbook. I have the dates. I have everything I need to tell the world that Maya Miller is a fraud. What do you want, Marcus? I want the company back. I want a seat on the board of Blue Canvas, and I want $2 million in a private account by Friday. If I don't see the transfer, I'm going to the New York Times. I'll make sure the silent city becomes a silent career. I don't have $2 million in liquid cash right now, Marcus. It's all tied up in the acquisition. Find it, he snarled, or start looking for a job as a delivery driver. I hear there's an opening. He hung up. I looked out at the water. I had reached my dark moment. I was trapped between a lie I had told the world and a truth that would destroy me. If I gave in to Marcus, he would bleed me dry forever. If I fought him, I would lose everything. I felt the weight of Clara's journals in my mind. I thought about her disappearing in 1979. I thought about the police report Marcus mentioned. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me, a thought so dark it made the river look bright. If Marcus had been digging into Clara's disappearance, what if he found more than just a sketchbook? What if he found the reason she never left the building? I turned away from the river and started walking. I didn't go back to the pier. I went to the city archives. I needed to see that police report for myself. Because if I was going down, I wasn't going down alone. I was about to find out that the Silent City wasn't just a collection of paintings. It was a map. And Marcus had just walked right into the middle of it. The city archives were located in a building that felt like a mausoleum for forgotten lives. The air was thick with the scent of decaying paper and floor wax. I sat at a scratched wooden table, my eyes burning from staring at microfilm for 3 hours. I was looking for case file 79-8082, the disappearance of Clara Vance. When the file finally appeared on the screen, my breath hitched. It was thin, barely 3 pages. Clara had been a rising star in the underground art scene of the '70s. She lived alone, had no family, and worked at a local diner to support her painting. On the night of October 14, 1979, she went to a supply store to buy charcoal and never returned. The police found her apartment untouched. No signs of a struggle. No blood dots. Just a half-finished canvas on an easel. But there was one detail in the report that made the blood turn to ice in my veins. The primary witness interviewed by the police was the building's superintendent at the time. A man named Silas Miller. Miller. I leaned back, the plastic chair creaking in the silence of the archives. Milhausen. My father's middle name was Silas. He had never talked about his life before he moved to the suburbs and started the logistics firm. He always said he started with nothing in the city. I did the math. In 1979, my father would have been 23 years old. He had been the super of my old building. He had lived in the basement unit, the same basement where I found those journals. The Silent City wasn't just my career. It was a bridge back to a crime my father had buried 47 years ago. And Marcus, in his desperate attempt to ruin me, had stumbled onto the shovel. But before we get into the confrontation that changed everything, I want to ask you, how well do you really know your parents? Have you ever found something from their past that made you realize they weren't who you thought they were? Drop your story in the comments. I'm reading them out. And if you're finding this story as intense as I am, make sure you're subscribed. I left the archives and took a car back to the pier. My mind was racing. If my father was involved in Clara's disappearance, the journals weren't just inspiration, they were evidence. Evidence he had kept hidden in that basement for decades. Why would he keep them? Guilt? A trophy? Or maybe he just forgot they were there, tucked behind a water heater he never thought anyone would move. As I entered the lobby, I saw Marcus. He was sitting in one of the velvet armchairs, looking disheveled and frantic. He had a thick manila envelope gripped in his lap. When he saw me, he stood up, a sneer of triumph on his face. "You're late, Maya," he said, loud enough for the concierge to hear. I was just about to go upstairs and start making some phone call. "Come up," I said, my voice cold. "We need to talk. Somewhere private." We didn't speak in the elevator. Marcus kept tapping his foot, his ego inflated by the secret he thought he held. When we reached my suite, I closed the door and didn't even take off my coat. "Show me the sketchbook, Marcus," I said. He pulled a small, charcoal-stained book from the envelope. He flipped to a page that showed a rough sketch of a city intersection. It was the exact composition of my painting the grid. The dates were clearly marked September 1979. "This is your career, Maya," Marcus said, his voice dripping with venom. "One call to the Sterling Gallery and they'll sue you for every cent of that $5 million. You'll be back in the gutter where you belong." "But I'm a nice guy. I'm giving you an out. Sign the company back to Dad. Give me the seat on the board and the $2 million. I looked at the sketchbook, then I looked at Marcus. "Did you read the police report, Marcus? The one from 1979? He blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I don't care about police reports. I care about this." He tapped the sketchbook. "The police report says that Clara Vance disappeared while our father was the superintendent of that building," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "It says he was the last person to see her alive. And these journals, the ones I stole, they were hidden in the basement, in the space behind the water heater that only the super could access." Marcus's face went from smug to pale in 3 seconds. He wasn't stupid. He was a business major. He understood liabilities. "You're lying," he stammered. Dad would never. He's a logistics guy. He's a suburban dad. He's not a..." "A what, Marcus? A murderer? A kidnapper? Think about it. Why was he so adamant that I never pursue art? Why did he react like I was committing a crime every time I picked up a brush? It wasn't about the money. It was about the trigger. Every time he saw me painting, he saw Clara. He was trying to bury her all over again, through me." Marcus looked down at the sketchbook in his hand. Suddenly, it didn't look like a winning lottery ticket anymore. It looked like a murder weapon. "If I go down for plagiarism, Marcus, the investigation won't stop at my bank account. They'll want to know where the journals came from. They'll look at the building. They'll look at the super from 1979. They'll look at Dad." I stepped closer to him. "You wanted to ruin me to save yourself. But you've just put a noose around our father's neck. Is that worth a seat on a board of a failing logistics firm?" The manila envelope slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. The golden boy was gone. In his place was a terrified kid who realized he had just set his own house on fire. "What do we do?" he whispered. "Maya, if this gets out, the family name, everything." The family name is already built on a graveyard, Marcus, I said. But I'm not like you. I'm not going to use this for blackmail. I'm going to use it for justice. For Clara. And for me. You're going to turn him in? Marcus looked horrified. He's your father. He was a father who watched me starve while he sat on a $5 million secret, I said. He was a father who told me my dreams were trash while he was hiding a life he stole in the basement. He didn't just refuse to help me with rent, Marcus. He refused to let me be a person. I picked up the manila envelope. I'm going to call Julian Sterling. I'm going to tell him the truth about the inspiration. I'm going to set up a foundation in Clara Vance's name with every cent of the $5 million. I don't want the money anymore. It's tainted. And Dad is going to tell me exactly what happened in 1979. I said, my heart cold and steady. And then, he's going to do the only honorable thing he's ever done in his life. He's going to confess. Marcus sank into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. He was broken. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had evaporated. I walked to the window. The sun was setting over the park, casting long, dramatic shadows over the trees. It looked like a Clara Vance painting. Haunt. Final. I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. He answered on the second ring. Maya? He said, his voice sounding tired. Look. I've been thinking about the offer. We'll take the deal. Marcus is already packing his things. Just tell the lawyers to send the final papers. The deal is off, Dad, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I'm not buying your company. I'm buying the truth. I'm at the Pierre, room 4022. Marcus is here. And he brought Clara's sketchbook. The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't the silence of a man who was surprised. It was the silence of a man who had been waiting for this phone call for 47 years. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. I hung up and looked at Marcus. Get up. Wash your face. We've had last family meeting. I felt a strange sense of calm. The broke artist was gone. The CEO was gone. There was only the daughter of a ghost, waiting for the man who made her. But as I waited, I looked back at the sketchbook Marcus had dropped. I flipped to the very last page. A page Marcus clearly hadn't seen. It wasn't a sketch of the city. It was a portrait. A portrait of a young man with ironed shirts and cold eyes. It was my father. And underneath it, in shaky, terrified handwriting, were 3 words. He's watching me. The cliffhanger wasn't whether my father would confess. It was whether we were safe in this room with him. Because if my father was willing to do whatever it took to keep his secret for 47 years, what would he do to the 2 people who finally found it? The 20 minutes felt like 20 years. Marcus and I sat in the sprawling living room of the suite, the shadows stretching across the floor like long, accusatory fingers. He hadn't moved from the armchair. He just kept staring at the door, his breath coming in short, jagged hitches. Every time the elevator chimed in the hallway, he flinched. I stood by the window, the city lights below looking like a scattered collection of cold diamonds. I had the manila envelope tucked under my arm. I thought about the girl in the sketchbook. Clara. She had been 25, younger than I am now, when she wrote those words. He's watching me. I wondered if she had stood in that same building, looking out at a different version of the same sky, feeling the same walls closing in. Before we get to the moment the door opens, I want to tell you something. I used to think the truth was a destination. I thought, if I just worked hard enough and stayed honest enough, I'd arrive at a place where everything made sense. But standing in that room, I realized the truth is more like an earthquake. It doesn't build anything, it just levels the ground so you can see what was underneath along. If you've ever had a ground leveling moment in your life, tell me about it in the comments. I'm here, and I'm listening. A heavy, rhythmic knock thudded against the suite door. Marcus jumped to his feet, nearly knocking over a floor lamp. Don't, he whispered, his eyes wide. Maya, don't let him in. We can still handle this. We can burn the book. It's too late for fire, Marcus, I said. I walked to the door and pulled it open. My father stood there. He wasn't wearing his usual iron shirt. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched under a heavy wool coat. Haas hair was disheveled from the wind, and his eyes, the eyes that had always looked at me with such cold disappointment, were wet. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past me into the room, his gaze landing instantly on the manila envelope. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the luxury of the suite. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, his hands resting heavily on his knees. "Where is it?" he asked. His voice was a raspy whisper. I walked over and laid the sketchbook on the coffee table between us. I flipped it to the last page. The portrait of the young man with the cold eyes. The man who was watching. My father looked at it for a long time. A single tear tracked through the deep lines on his face. "She was the most talented person I ever met," he said. "She saw things no one else saw, including me." "What happened, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. October 14th, 1979. "The police report says you were the last person to see her. They say she went to the store and never came back. But her journals were in the basement. They were behind the water heater you installed." My father closed his eyes. "I loved her," he said. "In a way a man like me wasn't supposed to love a woman like her. I was just the super. A kid from the trades with no future. She was a goddess. She painted the world into something I could actually stand to live in." "That's not an answer," I snapped. "Why would she write that you were watching her? Why was she afraid?" "Because I wouldn't leave her alone," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I was obsessed, Maya. I thought if I could just be near her, some of that light would rub off on me. I followed her. I watched her through the cracks in the doors. I thought it was protection. She knew it was a cage." Marcus took a step forward, his fear momentarily replaced by disgust. "You stalked her? The hard-working family man was a stalker?" "Huh?" "It was a different time," my father said weakly, but he stopped himself. "No, that's a lie. It was wrong then, too. That night, she confronted me. She told me she was moving out. She said she'd found a gallery in Soho and she was leaving the building. Leaving me." He looked up at me, and I saw the ghost of the man from the sketch. I panicked. I didn't want her to go. We were in the basement, near the boiler room by Amruki. I grabbed her arm. I just wanted her to listen. She pulled away. She slipped. The floor was wet from a leak. She hit her head on the iron casing of the old heater. The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the mini-fridge, the distant siren of an ambulance. "I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "I tried to wake her up. I stayed with her for hours. But she was gone. And I knew no one would believe the super. I was a nobody. She was an artist. They'd say I attacked her." "So you buried her," I whispered, the horror rising in my throat like bile. "Under the floor of the basement." "No," he said, shaking his head violently. "No, I couldn't do that. I took her to the old family farm in Indiana, the one that was abandoned. I laid her to rest under the oak tree by the creek. I brought her journals back because I couldn't bear to let them go. I hid them where I thought they'd be safe forever." He looked at me with a pleading intensity. "That's why I hated your painting, Maya. Every time you picked up a brush I saw her. I saw the night I destroyed the only beautiful thing I ever had. I thought if I could stop you, I could stop the memory. I thought I was protecting you from the curse of being like her. You weren't protecting me," I screamed, the tears finally breaking. "You let me starve. You watched me sleep in a freezing loft, the same kind of place she lived, and you didn't give me a dime because you were afraid of your own guilt. You let your daughter suffer to keep your secret." "I know," he whispered. "I'm a coward, Maya. I've lived every day since 1979 waiting for this room. Waiting for you to find me." Marcus was backing away toward the door. "We have to call the police," he said, his voice cracking. "Dad, you killed her. Plagiarism is one thing, but this? I can't be part of this." "You're already part of it, Marcus," I said, turning to him. "You used this to blackmail me. You sat in that restaurant and tried to extort $2 million using a dead woman's soul. Don't act like you're the hero now." Marcus froze. He looked at me, then at our father. The golden boy was gone. The CEO was gone. We were just three broken people in a $5,000 a night suite, surrounded by the wreckage of a 47-year-old lie. What now? Marcus asked. I looked at my father. He looked ready to die. He looked like he was already dead. You're going to give me the location of the farm, I said. The exact spot. And then we're going to the authorities. Not as a family, as witnesses. Maya, wait, my father said. He stood up, his hand reaching for his coat pocket. Marcus flinched, thinking he was reaching for a weapon, but he pulled out a small, old-fashioned key. This is for a safety deposit box at the bank in our hometown, he said. Inside is the deed to the Indiana property. And something else. Something Clara asked me to hold for her the week before she died. She said it was her insurance policy against the world. What is it? A letter, he said, addressed to a man named Julian Sterling. My heart stopped. Julian Sterling, my gallery owner, the man who had discovered me. Julian was her lover, Maya, my father said, a bitter smile crossing his lips. He was the one who was supposed to take her away. He's the reason she was leaving. He wasn't just a student when you met him. He was the man who had been looking for Clara for 40 years. And when he saw your paintings on Instagram, he didn't see a new artist. He saw the woman he lost. The cliffhanger wasn't just about my father's confession. It was about the man who had given me my $5 million. Julian hadn't bought my art because it was good. He had bought it because he knew exactly where it came from. He hadn't been helping me, he had been baiting a trap. And as the realization hit me, the suite door behind my father swung open.
Standing, there wasn't the police. It wasn't the hotel staff. It was Julian Sterling, holding a silenced pistol, his face as calm and indifferent as the city itself.
Thank you for the location, Robert.
Julian said softly.
I've been waiting a long time to know where you put her.
The silence that followed Julian's entrance was absolute. He stepped into the room with the practiced elegance of a man entering a ballroom, but the cold steel in his hand anchored us all to a terrifying reality. My father, Robert, didn't move. He looked at Julian not with fear, but with a weary recognition, as if he had been expecting this shadow to emerge from the corners of his life for half a century. Julian, my father whispered. You were the boy in the leather jacket, the one who waited for her at the corner every Friday. And you were the worm in the basement. Julian replied, his voice devoid of emotion. The one who followed her home. The one who thought that by hiding her body in a field, you could hide the fact that she chose me over you. Marcus let out a strangled sob and backed into the corner, his hands raised. I don't know anything. I just found the sketchbook. I have nothing to do with this. Julian didn't even glance at him. His eyes were fixed on me. Maya, my star. You have your father's blood, but you have Clara's eyes. When I saw your work, I thought for a moment she had come back to me, but then I realized the truth. You didn't have her talent, you had her journals. You were just a ghost thief. Before we reach the final resolution of this 47-year-old nightmare, I have last question for you. If you found out your entire success was built on a tragedy, would you give it all back to make things right? Or would you keep the secret to protect your future? Tell me the truth in the comments. I'm reading every word. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. The silent city is about to find its voice. You knew, I said, my voice shaking but loud. You bought the collection because you knew those were Clara's visions. You used me to find him. I used you to find her, Julian corrected. I spent 40 years and millions of dollars tracing every lead. When you appeared with those paintings that used the exact specific light theory Clara and I developed together, I knew she hadn't just disappeared. I knew she had been taken. And I knew only someone with access to that building could have stolen her soul so precisely. Julian gestured with the pistol toward my father. Get up, Robert. We're going to Indiana. You're going to show me the tree. And then, you're going to stay there with her. Forever. Julian, wait. I stepped between them. If you do this, you're no better than he is. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell. The world knows I'm here. The hotel has record of you coming up. I own the hotel, Maya, Julian said with a chilling smile. I own the security tapes. I own the silence. Move aside. But I didn't move. I looked at my father, a man who had failed me in every way a father could. He was a coward, a stalker, and a man who had built a life on a girl's grave. But as I looked at him, I realized that my revenge was already complete. He was a shell. He had been living in his own prison since 1979. No, I said. There's a better way. Julian, you want justice for Clara? Killing him in a hotel room isn't justice. It's just more blood in the basement. I turned to my father. Dad, give him the key. Give him the location. And then, you're going to walk downstairs, you're going to call the precinct, and you're going to tell them everything. From the boiler room to the Indiana farm, every word. My father looked at me, his eyes searching mine. For the first time, he didn't look through me, he saw me. You'd lose everything, Maya. The 5 million. The career. The reputation. If I confess, the silent city becomes the stolen city in every headline in the world. I already lost everything the night you told me the food was getting cold while I was being evicted, I said. The money was never mine. It was hers. It's time to give it back. The tension in the room was a physical weight. Julian's finger tightened on the trigger. He looked at my father, then at the sketchbook on the table. The image of his lost love, drawn by the man who had watched her, was staring up at him. Slowly, Julian lowered the gun.
The farm.
Julian said, his voice cracking for the first time.
Yep.
Tell me exactly where she is. My father spoke. He gave the coordinates. He described the oak tree, the bend in the creek, and the way the light hit the grass in the afternoon, the same light Clara had tried to paint. Julian listened, memorizing the map to his grief. Without another word, Julian turned and walked out of the suite, the door clicking shut behind him, that the room felt suddenly, violently empty. My father stood up. He looked at Marcus, who was still trembling in the corner, and then at me. I'm sorry, Maya. For everything. Don't say it to me, I said, opening the door for him. Say it to the detectives. He walked out. He didn't look back. He went straight to the nearest police station and confessed to the manslaughter of Clara Vance and the subsequent tampering with evidence. The fallout was exactly what he predicted. The Silent City scandal was the biggest story in the art world for a decade. The Sterling Gallery was shuttered amid investigations. My paintings were pulled from walls and placed into evidence. The $5 million was seized, and after a lengthy legal battle, I voluntarily signed every remaining cent into a trust for the Clara Vance Foundation for Disappeared Artists. Marcus disappeared. The logistics firm went into liquidation, and he ended up working a night shift security job in the suburbs he used to despise. My mother moved to Florida alone, refusing to speak to any of us. And me? I went back to a small studio. A loft in the city, but a quiet cottage in rural Illinois, not far from the farm where they found Clara. I don't use her journals anymore. I burned them the night after the confession. I started over. I painted the trees. I painted the creek. I painted the truth. Last month, I had my first gallery opening since the scandal. Not a one came because of the Maya Miller name. They came because the work was different. It wasn't haunting or isolated anymore. It was honest. It was mine. I sold my first piece for $500. It felt like $1 billion. As I was closing up the gallery, a package arrived. Inside was a small framed sketch. It was a portrait of a woman standing by a window, looking at a thunderstorm. It was me. It was drawn in charcoal, in a style that was unmistakably Clara's. There was a note from Julian. She would have liked your new work, Maya. You finally stopped watching the shadows and started seeing the light. Stay out of the basement. I hung the sketch in my hallway. It's the only piece of art I own that I didn't paint myself. My name is Maya. I was a broke artist, then a millionaire fraud, and now I'm just a woman who can look at a blank canvas without feeling like a ghost has holded the brush. Loyalty to yourself is the first loyalty. Everything else comes after. You can love your family and still refuse to let their secrets bury you. You can lose $5 million and walk away richer than you've ever been. That's my story. And if you're still here, thank you. That means more than you know. Now, I have a final question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have kept the secret and the 5 million, or would you have torn it all down for the truth? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single Wes. And if this story reminded you that it's never too late to start over, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next time.